I think it comes back to what you talk a lot about in CT50, which is progressive movement.
Right.
Somebody who has a lot of movement restrictions in their spine probably shouldn't be
Shouldn't just crank over backward.
trying to do a bridge. There are a lot of in between movements that you can do to get from nothing to be able to do a bridge. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with, spinal extension. Um, but I mean, you just have to respect your own limits because here's the thing, like if your body will figure out a way to get you to do the movement that you want to do, whether it's the right way or the wrong way. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Right.
if you are if you're very stiff in the upper back, for example, your body will give you what you want, but it's going to go get it, like, in your lumbar spine or in your sacroiliac connection.
Right.
And, you're going to end up hurting yourself at that point where you do have a little bit of mobility. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you're going to pinch something where you're getting all of your mobility, whereas that joint might move 2 or 3 degrees. If you have the right mobility all along your spine, you might be getting it to move 10 degrees, which is moving it into the spot where it's going to get injured.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually like how you mentioned that because, everybody thinks about flexibility as like a local thing, but they don't realize you can be flexible in one area, but that can actually cause you to be tight in another area because you have that flexibility to kind of aid the tightness. Do you have any like go-to mobility, flexibility style drills that you think tackle the most joints at the same time?
Oh,
I know I just keep putting you on
I
the
mean,
spot like over and over again.
honestly, I think the first thing that comes to mind, and it's not traditionally thought of as a mobility drill, but it would be, for me, full squats.
Yeah. For me, it's the overhead squat.
Yeah, actually, that's probably even better because you get even more of the the
Shoulders and spine.
scapular mobility into it. But the thing is, like, most people can't even do a good squat.
Right.
So I mean, I would start there, and then definitely for an advanced trainee or athlete or fitness enthusiast, definitely the overhead squat is like it's awesome. It's the gold standard, I would say, of mobility
Sure.
tests and mobility training.
So you would start with like a basic squat pattern. You're not just talking about like squatting to parallel back squat style. You're talking about
No, a real squat.
like ass to grass,
Yeah.
heels on the butt kind of squat, right?
Anything higher than that is not actually a real squat.
We were working
Unless,
out in Florida, and I was making a comment to Adam that he was squatting too low, giving him some crap for it because he's squatting his ass all the way down to the ground every single rep.
you got to.
He got to. So
Well, the thing is,
go ahead.
it's interesting. Well, I mean, there are exceptions, obviously. Like you've got a pre-existing knee condition, so you can't go that low yet. I think you'll get back to that. But it it's funny because people ask me all the time. They're like, "Aren't you scared of screwing up your knees?" But the actual biomechanical research that's been done on squatting shows that not going below parallel is actually harder on your knees because there's more torque, there's more shear force
Right.
on your knee at that thighs parallel position than when you come down further. Because when you come down all the way into the hole, you actually recruit the posterior chain a lot more to come out of the hole and complete the movement. So you're you're engaging your glutes and your hamstrings a lot more when you come down below parallel,
Yeah. So
which takes a
duly
lot of the
noted.
shear force off of your knee.
Squat below parallel, people. Make sure you learn good form, though, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I'm not, I don't take a new client and just assume, all right, let's do ass to grass squats right away. There's a progression there. You gotta learn how to do it.
Yeah,
And it's a
absolutely.
skill. It's a skill. There's mobility involved, but a lot of mobility and flexibility is actually just the nervous system.
Right.
I mean, you can trick people into increasing their mobility and their flexibility by 50% sometimes just with nervous system drills. So people think, well, I'm not flexible, but it's not that they're not flexible. It's just their nervous system doesn't trust them enough to do that movement, to get into that position. So if you teach your clients, if you get your clients to teach their bodies that it's safe to be there, then they'll be able to do it in a lot of cases. A lot of cases, in a lot of situations, it's not tissue restrictions that cause inflexibility. It's nervous system issues usually.
That's really interesting stuff. It's basically like your body's afraid of going into that position because it doesn't think that you're capable of stabilizing in that position, right?
Yeah.
And you teach it how to go there successfully, and it can go back.
And that's actually, one of the problems with stretching, the way it's done conventionally,
Sure.
is you're stretching tissues, moving them into a new range of motion that you have absolutely no nervous system control over. So you can actually do more harm than good sometimes by stretching someone into a position that they can't control, which is why I prefer increasing mobility and flexibility, usually more through like mobility type drills and skill-based exercises.
Well, I know we got a lot of inflexible people probably listening to the call, and you mentioned being like super tight only a handful of years ago, and then you started doing a ton of mobility. And I think one of the interesting things you mentioned was like you had to work really hard at first, but after a while you get this amount of flexibility where you just have to kind of maintain it in order to keep it. What kind of advice would you give for somebody who's maybe listening to this and they're like, oh, dude, I know my shoulders are tight, my hamstrings are tight, my ankles are like they're just a ball of tightness?
What advice? Like where to start, you mean?
Yeah, just what advice? Like if you were talking to you and you were just trying to give yourself a little advice, a little motivation to like get started, what would you say? Like, what would you say to yourself back then?
Okay, well, a couple of things. First of all, like the no pain, no gain thing doesn't work for this stuff. It's a plane like flying in to enemy territory under the radar. As soon as your plane pops up high enough and goes onto the enemy's radar, you're screwed. So basically, you're trying to coax your body into new ranges of motion without setting the alarm bells off. So one way to think of it is move into the restricted range of motion, but not past it. Go up to that point where you're starting to feel the discomfort. Don't ever try to go past that. And you're teaching your body when you do that, okay, it's fine. It's safe here, no problem. I feel comfortable here. Next time you do it, it's going to let you go a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. So that's one thing. Definitely don't try to push yourself into ranges of motion that you're not comfortable with. Good example, I've heard horror stories of yoga instructors, for one, actually like pushing people into ranges of motion with like no cooperative effort at all with the person in the class that's being pushed on. It's like the worst thing you could possibly do, because all you're doing is like reinforcing your body's impression that this is a very dangerous thing to be doing.
Right.
Because you're surprised, it hurts, it's like shocking, right? So you can do manual manipulation like that, but you need to be a really well-trained practitioner or therapist, and you have to have like full cooperation with the person that's doing it. There's all kinds of like ART and stuff like that where you can get into that kind of stuff, but if you're just doing your own mobility stuff, don't force ranges of motion, and don't let anyone force you into a crazy range of motion. That would be the biggest piece of advice that I would have. Because I mean, before I got into all this stuff, that's what I would do. Is I thought stretching was like
no pain, no gain.
Let's do it. Like, let's get this done. Let's get a new range of motion. But it's not. Doesn't work like that.
That's super funny. I was laughing the whole time because I just think about like the yoga class I used to take where they had this teacher that would always come by and push on you and like what, like, it's hard because people think of yoga as a movement discipline, so they assume that a yoga instructor is really intelligent when it comes to like proper alignment. But half the time I look around the class and everybody's doing stuff with just terrible postures and forms, and the teacher's not really doing anything to adjust them.
Yeah.
So that's a good warning, man. That's a really good warning.
Yeah. I mean, a good yoga instructor should understand physiology, and a lot of them do. Like, I work with a girl named Chris Fondren who's got
Right.
a program called Shapeshifter Yoga, and she's also got a master's in exercise science. So I mean, she gets it. But the other thing is, like, a good yoga instructor should be able to talk you through understanding the movement and letting yourself move into those ranges of motion, and having a like guiding you to a self understanding of where you are and where you want to go and how to kind of coax your body to get there.
Yeah, well, I wish there was more of those instructors, but I'm in the Bay Area, man. You throw a rock and you hit a yoga instructor. They're everywhere. Oh man. Well, let's talk about what you're kind of known for. Let's talk about bodyweight training. I know we talked about muscle and mobility and flexibility and stuff like that. So how did you get started with bodyweight training, and kind of like what's the best place for other people maybe to get started with bodyweight training?